Amazing millionaire discovers mother eating in the rain. His transformational secret revealed. Brad Thompson could feel the weight of his own success bearing down on him as he trudged through the drizzling evening, his mind still reeling from a grueling board meeting that had stretched on too long. The glassy skyscrapers around him reflected the lights of a shimmering Manhattan, but inside, a disquiet brood. Has he sacrificed too much? As he glanced up at the neon marquee advertising the latest Broadway hit, a nagging emptiness clawed at him. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. He had worked so hard to escape the mundane, the poverty of his childhood, the nights spent wondering if they would eat. As he crossed the subway overpass, something stopped him dead in his tracks. A frail figure huddled in the dim light just beyond the overhang. His heart clenched, muscles tensing as he recognized her. His mother. Linda sat on the wet pavement, hunched over a styrofoam container, her thin hands cradling the remnants of a meal that seemed all too familiar. It tore through him like a jagged knife, the vivid memories of their past flashing before his eyes. Cooking together in their cramped kitchen, the laughter amidst struggles. How could he have let it come to this? Each step toward her was heavy with conflicting emotions. Shame, anger, love. "Mom," he found himself murmuring. But dread rippled through him as her head lifted. Rain cascaded down her face, mingling with the soft light that caught the edges of her weathered features. This was the last thing he wanted to see, yet his heart compelled him to approach, battling the sense of social embarrassment and personal guilt that rose within him. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment of silence that followed felt monumental. They locked eyes, a tempest of unspoken words swirling between them. He was a man on top of the financial world, yet that title felt so hollow in the presence of the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. Her struggles, her dreams buried for him to succeed, weighed heavily in the air. As she shared snippets of her life since his rise to success, how she struggled to make ends meet without him, each confession chipped away at the facade he had built around himself. Was this what he'd fought for? Or was it just another battle won in a never-ending war for validation? Caught in that moment, he felt the specter of his past rise up, overwhelming him. He wanted to scream, to rail against the inequities of success that had elevated him, but left her behind. How had profit margins come to define success over human connection? The urgency of the life he had crafted felt painfully inadequate beside the warmth he had once known. As the rain fell, mingling with his racing thoughts, and his phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, a tether to a world that demanded his attention, he wrestled with an agonizing question. Could he ever reconcile the pursuit of wealth with the essence of who he was? In that relentless downpour, he stood at the brink, a man divided, his mother waiting with hopeful eyes. Would he rise to meet this moment, or would he vanish back into the bustling chaos of a life that felt like it was slipping through his fingers? The rain washed over them, each drop echoing a choice yet to be made, one that could change everything or ensnare him in a future devoid of soul. Brad felt as if time had momentarily ceased as he stood before his mother, emotions flooding in like the relentless rain that drenched them both. The turmoil inside him spiraled into a singular thought. This moment could not just disappear into the chaos of his life. It was profoundly personal, a reckoning rooted deep within what he had chased for the past decade. "I didn't know," he finally managed to whisper, the confession slipping from his lips almost against his will. He had pursued happiness through success, yet as he gazed at her fragile figure, the realization crashed over him that his achievements had come at a staggering personal cost. Linda's weathered eyes searched his face, and in that instant she mirrored the hurt he felt deep inside. "I didn't want you to suffer like I did." Her voice trembled with unguarded emotion, each word a needle pressing into his conscience. The gravity of her sacrifice bore down on him, filling him with a shame he couldn't shake off. He had chased the face of ambition, yet had turned a blind eye to the truth. The hardships that had paved his way to the top were never meant to be traded for solitude and regret. "Mom, He struggled to articulate his thoughts, to justify his choices to the one person whose approval mattered most. Yet nothing he could say felt adequate. Instead, he reached down, extending a hand for her to take. The gesture was simple, yet it made Brad feel vulnerable, exposing layers of emotions he had long kept hidden from himself. As she took his hand and slowly rose to her feet, he felt an overwhelming need to heal the chasm that had grown between them. In that moment, he resolved to fortify the bond that defined his childhood. Taking a deep breath, he invited her to sit with him on a nearby bench, offering shelter from the rain that continued to pour. "We need to talk," he insisted, the fear in his voice contrasting with the resolute spark igniting within him. "I've lost sight of what really matters, Mum." With each word, he began to unravel the impact of his choices, recounting the lonely board meetings, the glamorous parties where he felt utterly disconnected, and the relentless push for more wealth, more validation, at the expense of genuine human connection. As Linda listened, tears gleamed in her eyes, and an understanding passed between them that transcended the years of silence. They recognized the pent-up resentment and fear lying just beneath the surface. He promised her he would be better, would rethink the very foundations he had built his success upon. But promises were easy. What really hung in the balance was whether he could redefine his priorities in a world that glorified wealth. Uncertainty gnawed at him, as he feared losing the very status he had fought so hard to gain. Gradually, Brad realized he needed an actionable plan, something tangible that could bridge the divide and allow for change. Yet, as they shared their dreams, aspirations, and regrets, the weight of his dilemma loomed larger than life. Could he dismantle his life structure, built upon prosperity, and replace it with values that genuinely reflected who he was beneath the facade? Plans vaguely formed in his mind, but clarity was still a distant hope. With the weight of that question crushing down on him, Brad locked eyes with his mother anew. "Let's build something together," he declared, a flicker of determination igniting within him. "I want to create something that honors our journey." But was this a genuine purpose, or merely a desperate plea for redemption? He couldn't tell. And as he pondered how he would navigate this uncharted territory, the next challenge loomed in the shadows of his mind. What if success demanded changes he wasn't willing to make? The shadows whispered, ready to test him once again. The rain continued to drizzle, but within Brad a storm began to churn. His mother's presence ignited something dormant deep inside him that begged for attention, an awareness that he had been skirting around for years. Building something meaningful wasn't simply a project. It was a revival of purpose, a chance for a new direction. Yet doubt still tightened its grip on him like vines around an ancient tree. He withdrew his hand and leaned back, staring into the distance where dark clouds loomed overhead. What would it take to truly embark on this journey together, to forge something out of the fragmented pieces of their lives? It was easy to recite promises, but actions would define his intent. He couldn't resort to the same patterns. He needed to innovate, adapt. He had to engage with more than just the superficial shell of success. "What do you want to build, Brad?" Linda's voice broke through the fog of his thoughts, her inquiry piercing straight to the heart of his uncertainty. He turned to her, the question rolling through his mind. What did he truly want? Gradually, he began to articulate ideas, and as the words flowed, they felt like tendrils reaching toward an unseen fire. "I want to create something that uplifts others like us," he responded, granting life to the vision. "Something that addresses real issues, creates genuine connections, and perhaps even helps others to find their paths." The sincerity in his voice was tangible, a promise not just to his mother, but to himself. A profound conviction started to crystallize. He could blend his business acumen with a humanitarian approach. He envisioned an organization that tied individuals from various walks of life into a community, leveraging their skills for mutual growth. Yet as he spoke, insecurities grappled for space in his mind. Could he lead such a venture when he felt so ill-equipped? The boardrooms and conference calls had never prepared him for a mission grounded in authentic human experiences. He questioned whether he would connect deeply with others, fearing they would see him as a wealthy outsider chasing validation rather than an ally. Linda noticed the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes and reached out, resting her hand atop his. "You have so much to offer, Brad. Remember who you are. Your past might reflect your struggles, but those struggles shaped your insights. You understand pain and desire for connection better than anyone. This is your chance to apply that knowledge." As her words settled into his mind, a spark of adrenaline rushed through him. She was right. He had lived through seasons of disconnection, and he possessed a unique understanding of what it meant to struggle alone in a world obsessed with status. This experience could become his strength instead of his liability. Brad exhaled deeply, feeling a surge of determination rising from within. "Let's begin small," he proposed suddenly. "We can start with workshops or community gatherings, anything that encourages people to share their stories." The prospect ignited a flicker within him, but immediately another apprehension crashed over him. How to fund this vision? The tension spiraled inwards. Would he have to redirect his financial resources, managers, and networks towards this unexpected venture? The thought churned restlessly, presenting yet another quandary as he approached the precipice of change. "I'm in," Linda supported firmly, "but know that every step towards this vision will require sacrifice. Are you ready for that?" The looming question felt like an unsheathed sword hovering over him. Sacrifice wasn't a concept he could negotiate with, yet at the same time, distancing himself from comfort might reveal missing pieces of his identity. With each moment he hesitated, he also found the weight of responsibility growing heavier. If he were to commit to this new path, he couldn't merely seek to redeem himself, he had to genuinely transform. "Ready or not, it's time for action," he finally admitted to himself, each word resonating through his core. The thrilling uncertainty of the unknown was exhilarating, yet terrifying, but Brad understood the only way forward was through it. As they stood together, rain beginning to ease, one question loomed larger than ever. Was he willing to abandon the certainty of his past success for the ambiguity of a truer life? Brad felt the shiver of possibility running through him, and in this moment, no answer seemed right but an unwavering dedication to find out. But with that dedication came a darker thought that whispered in the corners of his mind. What if he couldn't carry the weight of his new dream? The silence between them hung heavy, inviting the dawning realization that the journey ahead would demand every bit of resilience he could muster. The true battle was just beginning, and as they rose from the bench, he knew he would have to confront not only external obstacles but also the shadows within himself, attempting to hold him back. As Brad and Linda walked away from the park bench, the damp air felt charged with possibility, the remnants of rain sprinkling their path like the early stages of change. He couldn't shake the heaviness brewing within him, a nagging echo that questioned the very foundation of what lay ahead. Every step felt like a step toward uncharted territory, and the weight of his decision loomed larger with each noise and person they passed. He realized they needed a strategy, and soon. The initial spark of his idea demanded more than passion, it required a structure. Once they reached his car, Brad opened the door and sank into the driver's seat steeped in thought. Linda settled beside him, the warmth of her presence an anchor against the restless tides within. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her eyes soft yet curious. "I don't know where to begin." His voice carried a hint of vulnerability, exposing the uncertainty that lingered beneath his facade. The realm of workshops and gatherings felt distant, like a teasing mirage on the horizon. "I've always worked with numbers, with spreadsheets. This is entirely different." Linda nodded knowingly. "It may be different, but it doesn't mean you're not equipped for it. You have a network, resources to draw from. It's time to leverage them in a way that matters." He leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. "But unlocking those connections for this project feels consuming. If I redirect my resources, I risk everything I've built." Doubt gripped him again, tightening around his heart. He wished to induce a transformative wave, yet the ambition appeared suffocated under the weight of past achievements. "What's the worst that could happen?" she challenged gently. "If you start this journey, the worst outcome is learning. About the world and about yourself. Isn't that worth the risk?" Her words resonated within him, striking a chord interwoven with fear and exhilaration. He had lived a life dictated by tangible success, where damages were quantified and risks were neatly calculated. But what if the risk lay more in maintaining the status quo than in seeking a deeper purpose? "I could fail," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Or you could succeed in ways you never imagined," she countered, a spark igniting in her eyes. That flicker of hope compelled him toward a decision fraught with complexity. The internal struggle played out like scenes from a script he never anticipated acting in. "I need to confront my past. I can't just rewrite my narrative with a shiny new project. I want to connect with people in a way that's real. What if, for once, he allowed vulnerability to lead instead of shield?" As they drove, Brad quickly sketched outlines of ideas on a crumpled notepad sitting in the console. Each word that flowed solidified his intentions. Workshops could indeed serve as a catalyst for stories, channels through which others might feel seen, understood, and willing to share the burdens they carried. But there remained a hurdle. How would they structure these engagements without adequate funding? The answer hovered just out of reach, a specter of doubt clouding his thoughts. Would people really even be willing to share? He mumbled aloud. "I mean, what makes my story, or our story, worthy enough? What can I offer?" "Start small, Brad. No one expects perfection. Authenticity resonates," she said. "You've got the charm and insight. You can tap into people's strengths. You just have to find the right way to frame it." He strained to visualize the audience before him, faces of diverse experiences, a tapestry woven with shared struggles. They could unlock stories that might even lead to funding from unexpected places. But could he access that openness effectively? The weight of uncertainty settled over him like a tangible force, forcing him to articulate what he feared most. What if they don't connect? What if I can't inspire them? "This uncertainty is the incubator for your growth, Brad." Linda's voice washed over him with clarity. "You must acknowledge it, embrace it. That's where the magic happens." Brad let her words sink in, their truth a stark reminder of the potential path ahead. He pulled onto the main road, the ever-shifting landscape mirroring the tides of his thoughts. Something cracked open within him. Perhaps he didn't need to have every piece perfectly aligned before carving out this new path. Perhaps it was enough just to step into the void. As they pulled into the familiar parking lot of his office, a realization struck. A slight shift that whispered of untapped inner strength and the elusive potential to rise anew. But a question lingered, a shadow hovering just at the periphery. What if confronting his past unearthed more than he was prepared to handle? As he parked, he felt both the thrill of possibility and the gnawing pang of what could be uncovered. The journey had barely begun, yet it threatened to unearth everything he thought he knew about himself, and he could not close his eyes to it. Brad stared at the polished desk, cluttered with papers and corporate memorabilia, the ambient hum of fluorescent lights buzzing around him like a swarm of indecipherable questions. The comfort of routine felt like a velvet cage, one that he was no longer sure he wanted to inhabit. He needed clarity, but clarity was elusive, buried beneath layers of expectations and self-imposed limitations. Linda's encouragement echoed in his mind. Start small. He contemplated what that meant in a world where he had always been expected to deliver impressive, well-defined outcomes. As he sifted through the documents piled on his desk, a realization crept over him. What if he reframed this? What if this effort to inspire and connect didn't need to start with grand gestures but with a conversation, even an email? He opened his laptop and with hesitant fingers began typing. Writing drafts for potential workshops transformed the initial chaos into purpose. The text flowed, fueled by both excitement and fear, a fear that reminded him of his fragility, yet energized him to embrace that vulnerability. The Journey of Authenticity, Discovering Your Story, was his working title. Each word brought him closer to a vision that felt both ridiculous and liberating. He pictured people crowded around tables, sharing their stories, reclaiming their narratives. each tale a thread, weaving individuals into a vibrant tapestry of human experience. The first ripple of excitement surged through him, a feeling he hadn't anticipated. As he formulated a plan, he forced himself to confront the skepticism in his mind. Were he and Linda naive to think they could generate interest? What if their outreach hit a wall of indifference? The thought stung, but pushing through it forged a steely resolve within him. Success wasn't guaranteed, but the possibility of genuine connection electrified him. He could highlight shared fears, joys, and struggles. Perhaps authenticity was indeed a wellspring for creativity, connection, and even funding. The idea tied back to a humble yet profound notion, providing open spaces where people might dare to be vulnerable. He closed the laptop and leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Linda had been right. The fear of failure was a necessary weight, a catalyst for movement. The next step would be crucial, reaching out to his network. He pulled out his phone and hesitated, thumb hovering over familiar names. Here was his chance to reach beyond the confines of finance and dip into the vibrant, messy world of humanity. Brad felt the clenching in his stomach change to something warm. This wasn't just networking, it was a call for community, a collective desire for authenticity. He selected the first contact, an old colleague who had ventured into the realm of psychology. Gripping the phone, he hesitated again. What if they dismissed his idea? What if they laughed at him? But the thrill of potential connection steadied his resolve. He hit send on the message inviting collaboration, and a wave of relief washed over him. Days morphed into a steady rhythm, each conversation with potential partners igniting something new within him. Responses varied. Some offered support, some were skeptics, and others were intrigued but non-committal. Each interaction nudged him further along a path of self-discovery. More importantly, they revealed the many facets of vulnerability he had yet to confront within himself. But shadows of doubt still flickered. Would people genuinely engage? Would he find a way to fund the workshops? What remnants of his past desires did he have to wrestle to sustain this endeavor? One evening, he stared into the mirror, tracing the lines of his reflection. The weight of his unfulfilled aspirations loomed large and unyielding. "What am I really afraid of?" he whispered to himself. The question hung in the air, charged with an urgency that demanded an answer. The dialogue within challenged him to confront an unpalatable thought. Failure was not the worst option. The real danger lay in never trying. As he ventured deeper into this unknown space, Brad felt the resolve intensifying, but also sensed a looming confrontation on the horizon, a reckoning with his past that he still dared not acknowledge. Just as he had begun to adapt to this emerging identity, he realized he was inching closer to the moment he would finally have to face what lay buried in his history. What awaited him would not only shape the workshops, but could also redefine who he was, both personally and professionally. The air felt electric with endless possibilities as he prepared for the next steps. He knew one thing for certain: the journey ahead could turn out to be more difficult than any number or projection he had ever calculated. Yet there was something exhilarating about the unknown. Would the next encounter yield clarity, or would it unveil more hidden fears? The complexities of both vulnerability and opportunity hung in the balance, leaving him teetering on the edge of discovery. With every passing day, Brad found himself immersed in a whirlwind of emotions and ideas, his plans for the workshop swirling around him like confetti in a gust of wind. Each interaction with potential collaborators felt like a step on an uncharted path, and yet those initial feelings of excitement were tempered by an inseparable undercurrent of apprehension. Would this ambitious endeavor truly resonate with others? The lingering shadow of self-doubt loomed over him like a gathering storm. He finally secured a meeting with an influential figure in psychology, Emma, a respected mentor known for her unique approach to group dynamics. Brad meticulously prepared for their conversation, rereading every email they exchanged, analyzing each detail for hints on how to present his vision. As he sat down at the small cafe across from Emma, he wondered if he would be able to articulate his passion convincingly. "Thanks for meeting me on such short notice," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Of course, I'm intrigued by your idea," Emma replied with an encouraging smile. Brad felt a flicker of warmth at her genuine interest, and he soon found himself explaining his vision for the workshops with increasing fervor. Words flowed as he described the importance of storytelling as a therapeutic outlet. Yet beneath the confidence he exuded, a nagging question lingered. Was this truly the catalyst he needed to transform both his career and himself? Emma listened, nodding thoughtfully, offering insights that both challenged and motivated him. "You're onto something significant here, but I sense a hesitation. What are your reservations about this project?" At her probing question, Brad's chest constricted. He hesitated, internalizing the weight of his past, those moments in his career where he faltered, lost sight of his purpose, and let fear overpower ambition. I fear facing rejection," he admitted, his voice faltering just the slightest. "I've spent so long in a world driven by metrics and deliverables that I worry I won't be taken seriously in this creative space." Emma studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly but softening with understanding. "Vulnerability breeds connection, Brad. The fear of rejection can only hold you back if you allow it. Authentic engagement requires you to front those fears. Embody the journey you're asking others to partake in." Her words ignited a flicker of realization within him. He was so focused on the end result that he forgot the beauty of the process itself, the way it could lead to profound personal revelations. The conversation opened a new doorway in his mind. His fear didn't just stem from the possibility of personal failure, but also from undervaluing the experiences that shaped him thus far. As their meeting concluded, Emma expressed interest in joining as a collaborator. The thrill of having her expertise available was intoxicating. Yet, even amid the excitement, doubt simmered beneath the surface. What if she or others uncovered his hidden insecurities during the workshops? Walking away from the cafe, Brad's mind was abuzz. With one foot in the future he dreamed of, and the other lodged in the mud of his past uncertainties, he realized he needed to confront those buried stories and the shame that accompanied them. The epiphany felt monumentally heavy, but as he honed in on how to navigate this new awareness, he also felt lighter. The stories he had previously feared were now emerging like tentative sprouts after a rainstorm. Herein lay the potential for growth, but clarity was still shrouded in the fog of his doubt. There was no denying that this journey of self-discovery was intertwined with his professional aspirations. Each workshop loomed like a mirror, forcing him to look deeper. Would he dare to reveal himself, share not only triumphs, but also the scars that marked his path? Amid the cacophony of questions, the flames of determination flickered brighter. He was standing on the precipice of transformation. But as he stepped back into the familiar rhythm of his life, he wondered, what would happen when push came to shove, when he could no longer hide behind words on paper or the comfort of the corporate world? The answer might just redefine everything he thought he knew about authenticity, ambition, and his own capacity for resilience. The moment of truth was fast approaching. What awaited him on the other side? As the days drifted by, Brad found himself oscillating between anticipation and trepidation. The proposals for the workshops were taking shape, the stories he yearned to share gradually crystallizing in his mind. Yet each sunrise greeted him with an unsettling question. How much of himself was he truly willing to disclose? Each workshop would demand that he step outside the familiar bounds of professionalism and into the rawness of his personal experience. In his office that week, he pored over countless resources about storytelling, searching for techniques that would engage rather than alienate. The books piled high on his desk seemed to bear down on him, each spine a silent witness to the internal struggle. He felt the paradox of preparation. Immersing himself in theory was safe, yet the act of sharing personal narratives terrified him. Would his story resonate, or would it wither under scrutiny? On a particularly restless evening, Brad found himself stuttering through practice sessions in front of a mirror. He spoke aloud the tales he long withheld, his childhood dreams of becoming a writer, the moments spent grappling with feelings of inadequacy, the heart-wrenching loss of his father that had carved deeper lines into his spirit than any corporate failure. Each word pulled him into a deeper reflection, an exploration of his vulnerabilities. In this practice, something unthinkable began to bloom. He found semblances of courage tucked within those memories, Yet the spectre of doubt still loomed overhead like a spectre. Each time he faltered before the mirror, Bruce, the voice in his head, echoed memories of slammed doors and harsh critiques. It wasn't just the fear of critique that stung. It was the haunting notion that he might expose his heart only to find it dismissed. The following week brought another unexpected hurdle. Emma reached out with a proposition. They would co-facilitate a small group session, inviting a few colleagues for an informal discussion about the workshops. It was a step toward sharing, but Brad's mind swirled with what-ifs. What if they reacted like critics instead of collaborators? What if vulnerability became a liability? This looming encounter required a reckoning. A decision formed in the back of his mind, teetering between retreating to the safety of detachment and embracing the rawness of authenticity. He remembered Emma's insight about vulnerability. Now it felt more relevant than ever. Night after night, he stayed awake, grappling with his narratives, writing down the stories by candlelight, allowing their energy to seep into his bones. These stories were more than chronicled moments. They were potent elements of his identity, the building blocks of his authenticity. Breathing life into his past became not a means of overshadowing his professional self, but a way to enrich it. As the session approached, he composed a personal mantra. Every story shared is a thread in the fabric of connection. Would it be enough to break the chains of self-doubt that bound him? The night before the session, he sat in silence, reviewing his notes and rehearsing anecdotes. An unsettling knot settled in his stomach. The fear of judgment swelled anew. Finally, he texted Emma late into the night, affirming his intention to embrace honesty during their session. But beneath that affirmation lay an undercurrent of panic. Was he truly ready to expose himself to others, to weave his fears into the workshops? As he wrestled with these internal conflicts, Bradley realized he had reached a decisive crossroad. Would he embrace authenticity at the risk of rejection, or would he retreat into the safety of a polished exterior? The moments were fleeting, yet the consequences felt monumental. What awaited him at the threshold of this unveiling? As sunlight broke through the horizon, he braced himself for the session, knowing that every story has the power to connect, heal, and perhaps even transform. But what lay behind the door of true vulnerability? The answer felt both tantalizingly close and terrifyingly distant. Would he take the leap? The room was alive with a soft buzz when Brad arrived the next morning, his heart drumming a nervous rhythm in his chest as he stepped into the meeting space. The intimate setup, chairs arranged in a circle with a single round table at the center, felt like both a safe haven and a daunting arena. Emma was already there, her presence grounded yet radiant, a stark contrast to the tumult of thoughts swirling in his mind. "Good morning, Brad," she greeted him, her smile breaking the tension momentarily. "Ready to dive in?" With a forced nod, he took a seat, his stomach twisted into knots. The gathering of familiar faces, his colleagues, did little to quell the storm inside. They were not just peers, they were the very mirror reflecting his innermost fears. As the session began, Emma took the lead, effortlessly guiding the discussion about storytelling and its power. Brad listened, her words wrapping around his anxiety like a comforting blanket. He began to see the collective energy in the room, a shared curiosity masked beneath their professional facades. Then came the moment when Emma turned to him, inviting him to share a personal story. Brad's breath caught. It felt like being called out in a classroom, exposed under an unforgiving spotlight. He gripped the edge of his chair, the mantra echoing softly in his mind, yet doubt clawed insistently at his thoughts. "Brad, what's a story that shaped who you are?" The question was straightforward, yet it felt like the weight of an entire ocean crashing down on him. With a frantic rush, he felt the walls he had built so carefully begin to tremble. Brad's mind raced. A cacophony of potential responses played out in rapid succession. But instead of retreating, he realized something significant. This was not a test of value, but an invitation to connect. Slowly he opened his mouth and began to weave the tale of losing his father. At first, words stumbled out in fragments. His voice quaked, carrying the weight of grief and the resolve to transform that pain into something meaningful. Each recollection was like a thread being pulled from a fabric that had long felt frayed. As he spoke, He could almost see the walls fall away, revealing the truth of connection that he had yearned for. His colleagues shifted in their seats, leaning in, their expressions shifting from mild curiosity to a profound engagement. They related their own experiences, sharing laughter, hesitation, and tears. The conversation blossomed, spilling over into the kind of vulnerability Brad had feared would be met with judgment. Instead, they responded with empathy and warmth. Sitting there in that circle, Brad felt a spark igniting deep within. This was not a mere workshop. This was a revelation, an awakening. With every story shared among colleagues, he discovered the courage to confront his inner critic. Each interaction felt like peeling back a layer of an old protective shell he had placed over his heart. The session flew by, ending with laughter, gratitude, and a burgeoning sense of camaraderie. As everyone lingered to chat, Brad found Emma at his side, her eyes brimming with encouragement. "You did it, Brad," she said, beaming. "You were incredible out there." A warm surge of pride mixed with disbelief swirled within him. He had laid bare a piece of his soul and found acceptance, not rejection. Still, as the adrenaline faded, lingering self-doubt threatened to encroach upon his newfound clarity. What if this was a fluke? What if tomorrow he would falter? As he walked to his car, that tension re-emerged, twisting into fresh questions he couldn't ignore. Had he genuinely changed, or was this merely an illusion crafted by the moment? The uncertainty loomed as he turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life beneath him. In the rearview mirror he glimpsed the building, a symbol of his evolving truth. But a shadow of apprehension tainted the triumph. How much of this revelation would stick when the adrenaline of vulnerability faded? Driving home, Brad wrestled with an impending sense of purpose intertwined with anxiety. What would he uncover next about himself? And as the horizon opened up before him, one undeniable question lingered. Was he truly ready to embrace the full extent of his authenticity, or would he find himself retreating once more into the safety of reserved silence? Brad parked his car in the driveway, but the safety of home felt deceptively fragile. Each step toward the front door was weighed down by the realization that the emotional breakthrough he had experienced was not just a fleeting moment. It was an ultimatum to face his authentic self. As he settled onto the couch, he found himself staring at the blank television, searching for something to anchor his thoughts. He picked up his phone, mindlessly scrolling through social media, while the words of his colleagues echoed in the back of his mind. There was a strange mixture of respect and camaraderie that had formed, and yet he couldn't shake off the creeping doubt that clung to his thoughts like an unwelcome shadow. Was he merely riding the wave of vulnerability? Would it dissipate as quickly as it had come? The stillness of the room heightened his internal dialogue. He thought about Emma. Her gentle encouragement and unwavering faith had helped him uncover something buried beneath the weight of expectations. Yet he couldn't help but wonder if his courage would falter when it was time to continue the journey he had just begun. A fresh commitment to himself felt tantalizing and terrifying in equal measure. In the days that followed, he meticulously planned for the next session. He wanted to recapture that energy, that feeling of liberation, but a nervous fear gnawed at him that perhaps he lacked enough depth or substance to keep this momentum as everyone anticipated more. What if today's raw truth revealed before his colleagues turned into crippling contradictions tomorrow? Each night, he rehearsed conceivable tales of his life, the good and the bad, but doubt about his ability to match the previous session's emotional resonance paralyzed his resolve. As he arrived that following morning, the comforting familiarity of the circular room met him once more. His heart raced at the thought of sharing again. The conversation initiated, but Brad remained uncharacteristically quiet, fixated on his own mental block while Emma led the discussions. Each story shared around the table felt like a spotlight further illuminating the chasm between vulnerability and the guarded existence he had known for so long. Finally, Emma glanced his way, a knowing look in her eyes that instigated a vital decision within him. He could feel the thinning veil of fear. It was now or never. The stillness created a magnetic pull that prompted him to rise. He cleared his throat, the room demanding his presence in a way that felt both exhilarating and suffocating. "Can I share something?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, yet carrying an urgency that surprised him. The room shifted, every set of eyes turning toward him, amplifying the sensation of exposure that made his breath quicken. Yet there was no judgment in their gazes. He took a steadying inhale, focusing on a story from childhood that resonated deeply with his ongoing struggle. It wasn't about grand moments, but the subtle instances that had shaped his perception of safety and acceptance. As he recounted a memory, the words poured forth. They came unfiltered and raw. For the first time, he mentioned the fear of inadequacy he faced while grappling with expectations his entire life had seemed to uphold. Faces softened and breaths steadied in the audience of colleagues who had become something far greater than simple co-workers. Their resonance hung in the air, an unspoken agreement of connection. By the end of his narrative, the fear that had sculpted his silence began to dissolve in an unforeseen wave of release. Laughter erupted around the room once more, but instead of retreating, he remained firm, absorbing their responses of empathy and understanding, like a long-awaited balm to his soul. It was exhilarating yet terrifying to step into this new territory of authenticity. But with each interaction, Brad sensed that he was slowly breaking the chains of his past, forging a pathway into who he was meant to be. Challenges still awaited him, but as he sat back down, something profound had shifted. And amidst the subtle high of newfound revelations, one sharp realization pulsed steadily. If he wanted to build upon this foundation of connection and truth, he must confront not just the expectations he held regarding others, but those he secretly harbored towards himself. What identities would he have to shed? What strength lay hidden underneath layers of doubt yet to be unearthed? As he pondered these questions, a tension coiled inside him, a precursor to what he knew was an impending confrontation, one that would shake the very bedrock of his beliefs. The moment of truth approached, and Brad couldn't help but wonder if he was truly prepared to face the person he had always been, or for the first time embrace the person he could become. Brad stood at the edge of a precipice, gazing out at the vastness of opportunity stretching before him. After weeks of engaging in storytelling workshops with Emma and his colleagues, he felt transformed, yet the weight of anticipation pressed down on his shoulders. This newfound energy coursed through his veins, paralleled only by the uncertainty of the journey ahead. In the quiet of the following week, as he prepared to launch a public workshop, Brad reflected on how far he had come. Gone was the man defined solely by his corporate success. He was not the disconnected millionaire anymore, but a bridge between his past struggles and present aspirations. Each workshop had drawn out stories from others that resonated deeply within him. As participants shared their experiences, vulnerabilities merged into a collective tapestry of humanity. Yet as enriching as these moments had been, the nagging thought of his own narrative loomed large. The public workshop was imminent, scheduled for a local community center. He envisioned it as a safe space, just like the circle he had shared with his colleagues. Still, with every passing hour, his anxiety mounted. He was terrified of the stories that would spill forth when he allowed himself to fully embrace vulnerability with strangers. "Make it about them," Emma had advised him. "This isn't about you showing off your journey, but opening up channels for connection." Her wisdom lingered in his mind like a guiding star, but the fear of judgment still echoed within him. On the day of the workshop, he arrived early, pacing the familiar halls. The energy in the room pulsed with potential, yet remained just beyond his grasp. As attendees began to gather, their faces a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and trepidation, he sensed the collective anticipation binding them. They were there, seeking connection, just as he had. With a few deep breaths, he stepped forward to address the group. "Hello everyone, thank you for being here today." As he spoke, the words, once fragile, began to resonate with conviction. "This is not just another workshop. It's a chance for us to share and learn from one another. My goal is to create a space where every story matters." Encouragement bubbled from the crowd, and the warmth ignited. Brad led the session through familiar exercises he'd done before, focusing on the power of storytelling. Each shared experience pulled him deeper into his own reflection. When participants began narrating their tales of sorrow, resilience, and triumph, he absorbed the rawness with gratitude. The more they opened up, the more he realized this was not merely about him. It was a communal journey toward healing and discovery. Finally, After a poignant and enlightening session, Brad felt the time was right for him to share something more personal. It struck him that this moment was not just for them, but a pivotal chance for his own growth. He took a breath, steadied himself, and spoke of the vulnerabilities he had kept buried beneath layers of success. "I come from a place of fear, a fear of inadequacy bred from childhood, and a drive that led me to professional heights. Yet here, today, standing before all of you, I choose to confront those fears instead of run from them. We all have stories that shape us, and it's in sharing them that we find connection." The room fell silent, eyes fixated on him, an electric understanding palpable in the air. He continued, weaving elements of his journey into a rich narrative that tied into their shared experiences. Rather than feeling exposed, he found strength in the openness of his honesty. As he wrapped up his story, Brad felt the tension release. He had stripped away the facade that had long shielded him. When he opened the floor for questions, the responses flowed freely, a symphony of voices emphasizing their shared humanity. "You didn't just tell us who you are, you showed us," one of the participants remarked. "That takes bravery." In that moment, all the fears he once cradled began to evaporate. He recognized the profound connection grounded in vulnerability. With each shared story, each lauded voice from the audience, he felt his sense of worth expanding. Days turned into weeks, and as their little workshop continued, Brad established a foundation rooted in honesty and purpose, creating a ripple effect within the community. People began to connect, support one another, and forge friendships. Brad's transformation mirrored the collective growth of those who attended. They were sharing resources, dreaming up new projects, and undertaking ventures built on the tenet of connection rather than competition. The workshop, initially a stepping stone for him, evolved into an organization focused on personal stories and the profound connections they could generate. Through this journey, Brad attained solid confidence, admired professionalism, and profound validation from his peers. With each workshop, he proved not only to the participants, but also to himself, that authenticity was a formidable catalyst for connection and change. Looking back, he could see how far he had come since that rainy day when he found his mother. The stark contrast between their circumstances propelled him to actualize a vision that transcended selfish ambition, aligning him with a purpose rooted not in monetary gain, but in human connection. He could now embrace the identity he had always yearned for, a man not defined by wealth but by the impact he had on the lives he touched. With a smile of deep satisfaction, he knew he had built something meaningful. The resolve that had once seemed out of reach was now his gratifying reality. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that unfold. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help more people discover these incredible journeys. Comment your reactions and theories about this heartfelt conclusion. Your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful transformation. Don't wait even one more second to connect others with these life-changing stories.